It's great to be with you all today, and it's great to have Undersecretary Silvers with us. We have a lot to talk about, but I thought we would start with something that's on a lot of people's minds, the midterm elections. After several years of major disruptions, foreign disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, physical attacks, it almost seemed like last week's elections was something of a return to normal, whatever that means. Wanted to get your take on what the day looked like for you. Did you expect it to be like that? How did it look for you?
Well, thanks, Aruna. Thanks to Aspen for having us. And I just want to say on a personal note, it's very nice to be back at the 92nd Street Y. I actually took art and music classes here as a toddler and have been back many times since, and great to be here with you today. Americans can and should have confidence in the security and integrity of our elections, including the midterm elections that recently happened. We had worked extensively with state and local jurisdictions that administer elections to ensure they had what they needed in the lead up to the elections. And on election day, we had a 24/7 ops center going to make sure we were on top of everything. We have no evidence that there was any activity that changed or deleted votes or interfered with critical election infrastructure. There were no specific or credible threats to election infrastructure on election day. Right now, votes continue to be canvassed and tabulated in various jurisdictions. In some jurisdictions, that takes longer than others based on what local state laws are, and that's how it's supposed to work, and that's actually why Americans can have confidence that the process is working as it is. And so between the terrific work of election administrators around the country and what CISA at our department did to help support them, we can and should have confidence in the integrity of the elections.
Before the elections, we did see some tech companies and the FBI talk about how there were some foreign disinformation campaigns that they had identified and took down. How worried were you about some of those things?
We're concerned about foreign malign influence campaigns when countries like China or Iran or Russia try to insert themselves into our democratic processes. That's something that we're going to be very vigilant to from a national security perspective. And CISA did put out its website called Rumor Control to ensure that Americans could get facts about election security. And again, now over a week after Election Day, we have confidence that we saw no evidence, of foul play that changed or deleted votes, and no specific or credible threats to the actual election infrastructure.
Right. So to take a step back a little bit on cybersecurity more broadly, we've heard for a few years now that one of the largest concerns has been the potential for attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure from Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. Now that you've been on the job a while, how do you rank your concerns, and sort of where are we at in terms of trying to address those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at what the last 2 years or so have brought, it has really been unbelievable in terms of the threat landscape and how dynamic it is. Almost exactly 2 years ago, you had the SolarWinds supply chain attack come. You had the Microsoft Exchange hack shortly thereafter, and then Colonial Pipeline was taken out, disrupting gasoline supply to the Mid-Atlantic region. And then just as network defenders, after a busy year, were hoping to get some rest for the holidays, the Log4j software vulnerability, the most serious vulnerability ever discovered, came to light around the holiday season last year. And then, of course, escalating tensions around Ukraine and all the cyber risks coming with that. And so it's a very dynamic threat landscape. We continue to be concerned about China and their capability, Russia and its capability, and many others. And then, of course, the criminal actors, ransomware continues to happen at unacceptable levels. So between criminals and nation states, the threats are real. The good news is there are a lot of steps that companies and other organizations can take that are effective in protecting themselves, in building resilience. Defense matters, resilience matters in this space, and so our mission is to help enable those companies to harden up.
Some of those examples you just mentioned are all more than a year old, and to some extent we haven't had huge attacks like those in the past year. Should we read anything into that? Do you see that as sort of a positive trend line?
I wouldn't get too complacent. I think we see enough attempted intrusions and successful intrusions every day that we're not letting our guard down even a little bit. We saw ransomware hit a major healthcare system recently here in the United States, and so no, I don't read too much into any kind of pause. I don't really see a pause in that respect. I do see incredible efforts to build resilience and network defense. I think that companies, I think that industry are making a lot of progress there, but I think they need a lot of support from the government, and it is our mission to provide that to them in the form of developing and sharing best practices, in the form of sharing threat intelligence really, really quickly, declassifying information really, really quickly. So for example, when Russia started massing tanks on the Ukrainian border around this time last year, we went into an all-out push with our other agency partners in the federal government to declassify as much Russia-related threat information as possible and push it out to industry so that network defenders could use it to protect their systems. And so we are really going all out. We're not letting down at all.
Do you think that declassification effort specifically thwarted attacks that would have otherwise happened in terms of cyber attacks?
Well, I do think that there is a lot of evidence that good preparedness can be effective against Russian cyber attacks. I think Ukraine is actually a really strong example of that. The Ukrainian government has gotten a lot of support from the US government and other partner governments on the cybersecurity side. They've also been working really closely with Western technology and cybersecurity firms, and they have withstood a lot of Russian cyber attacks better than people expected they would. Now, obviously, it's not perfect defense. Some has gotten through, but they've also cut off at the pass some serious attempted intrusions and disruptive attacks in a way that I don't think the community would have predicted that they would have been able to do. And I think that's just really powerful, a really powerful lesson for all of us, again, that defense matters. How much you invest, how much you focus on it counts and will count in the crisis.
And you think Ukraine's ability to defend some of those is a direct result of the US sort of declassifying and sharing very quickly intelligence? I
think the combination of intelligence sharing, private sector companies from the United States and elsewhere helping them to detect malware that may have been deployed and actual potential live intrusions that may have been set to execute. Yeah, I think all that has provably been effective for Ukraine.
On ransomware, the Treasury Department put out some numbers last week that showed more than $1 billion in ransomware payments last year, and that was up more than double from the year prior. That suggests a pretty alarming trend, but then we also hear from industry executives that companies are getting better at having data backups and having a stronger ability to resist paying ransom. Where does that trend line look like to you from where you sit?
Ransomware, look, we just had, as I mentioned, a major ransomware attack on a hospital system, and so we're not, it's at unacceptable levels. So what we're doing is a multi-pronged approach. One, we are helping companies with their resilience, both in terms of withstanding the attack at all or being resilient by having backups that they can resort to and rebuild their infrastructure without having to pay the ransom. Two, we're actually going after the ransomware syndicates through increased law enforcement activity, and then also by going after their money. So we have sanctioned, as an administration, we have sanctioned cryptocurrency exchanges that don't have the kinds of controls that are needed and that are used by ransomware actors. We have seized cryptocurrency wallets that are used to process the proceeds from ransomware attacks. And so we're taking this on from all angles, and actually just about 2 weeks ago, 36 countries convened at the White House for our administration's counter-ransomware initiative. So we're doing this together with industry partners and also with international partners in this fight.
You mentioned cryptocurrency. I wanted to get your take on, we've obviously everyone's seen the implosion of FTX this week and the devaluing of some cryptocurrency. What is your take on how all of that turmoil impacts the fight against ransomware? Does it make it potentially harder for criminals to access ransomware payments? Does it have any impact at all? They may not have been using FTX, but...
At this point, I don't have a specific impact. It's too soon to tell, at least from anything I've seen, of whether there's been an impact on ransomware from what's happened at FTX. But I will say that with respect to cryptocurrency, look, there needs to be an architecture of security and integrity around the digital asset ecosystem. There need to be rules in the way that we have rules around other financial services to ensure integrity. And it's just, I see it all the time, not just in cybersecurity, but we have a variety of law enforcement missions at the Homeland Security Department, and practically any kind of criminal act or harmful act that you can imagine these days is being enabled by cryptocurrency. So it's really important that we have, from the regulatory side, that we have the right attention on it. And then also from the law enforcement side, we are investing hugely in our capabilities to trace cryptocurrency transactions, to try to do blockchain analysis, and to try to get back, trace it back to the bad guys or to seize the funds.
So you have talked a lot about trying to improve the federal government's relationship with the private sector to better combat ransomware and other cyber threats. This is something the FBI and even the State Department have been talking a lot about. Can you describe sort of what was that relationship like a year ago, and what would you like to see it look like a year from now?
Yeah, look, our strategy with respect to working with industry is to move past sort of one-off meetings with companies and declarations of partnership, but then everybody going back and doing their own thing, and really getting into a mode of real-time operational collaboration. I don't think we just need to lower barriers for work between the government and the private sector on cyber. We actually need to dissolve barriers. And the threat landscape is so sophisticated and worrisome that I don't think we need just sort of incremental changes. That's not how we're thinking about it and our work. We are making transformational changes to how we do business, to work with industry, and I'll give you a couple examples. Pre-incident, before incidents happen, and then during incidents, we've set up the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative at our Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, where companies, 30 or so of the biggest tech and cybersecurity companies, are with CISA and other US government agencies. It's all housed at CISA, and they are on Slack channels in real time, exchanging information about what they're seeing. Hey, I'm seeing this on my infrastructure. Is any of you seeing anything like this? Oh, these mitigations are working for me. You should try them. All in real time, informal. And what we can do is that helps all the companies that are part of it, and then we can extract the best lessons, the things that we're learning from it, and we can push it out to the broader community of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of companies.
And you're seeing a lot of uptick with the use of those channels.
Yeah, so in the I mentioned the Log4j vulnerability. It was really, really effective. It actually all came together. That was sort of just a few months after we stood up the JCDC. And it was a really amazing proof of concept that led to CISA being able to put out authoritative guidance that was incredibly valuable to the entire information security community. After incidents occur, we've established something called the Cyber Safety Review Board, right, which we stood up earlier this year. It's true public-private. It's half the members are all the federal leads for cybersecurity. I'm really pleased to serve as the chair of the board. Half the members are private sector luminaries in cybersecurity, and our charge is to review the very biggest cybersecurity incidents and do an authoritative fact-finding on what happened, and then lessons learned for the community. It's not about accountability, it's not about fines or regulations, it's just looking forward, how can we all do better? We did our first review this summer on Log4j. It landed really well with the community. We talked with over 80 companies that share data and information with us, and we're going to be announcing our second review actually pretty soon.
I assume you don't want to make any news today on that?
Stay tuned.
What did you learn from sort of doing that first review that will shape how you approach the next one?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is the appetite in the community for these kinds of reviews is really strong. When companies have been hit by a cyber attack, this was missing from the ecosystem. No one was doing a deep dive to find out what happened for the benefit of the whole community. You had the companies doing their own internal investigation often, but that was for their own purposes. Sometimes you had a law enforcement or a regulatory investigation, but that was narrow and for its own purpose. This is to just get the lessons learned out on an after-action basis. So that's going to be really good. The other thing, when we did the first review, the board was new. There was an element of building the plane as we were flying it. We did that successfully. We've now built up significant permanent staff. We have procedures in place. And so I think we're really going to be able to hit the ground running in a collaborative way with companies who share the information in with us.
And you expect to be reviewing another cyber attack? Or do you think you might broaden out to other types of incidents, tracing a disinformation campaign or anything like that?
I think cybersecurity is in the wheelhouse for right now of what we're looking at. That's really the charge that came to the president, who directed us to stand the board up in his executive order last year.
Right. And on the disinformation front, we've seen a lot of criticism from both the left and the right of social media companies for either promoting disinformation or throttling accurate information in hopes of trying to suppress disinformation. You mentioned the rumor control website. DHS had to shut down the Disinformation Governance Board earlier this year over First Amendment concerns about that. What do you see DHS's role at this point in the information ecosystem and trying to get at the problem of disinformation?
Look, where disinformation poses a tangible and core threat to security, we have a role to play. So when it's within our mission space. So I'll give you an example. After natural disasters, you have all kinds of scams where people try to defraud survivors of disasters by how they can get relief benefits, where they can get water or supplies. And FEMA's mission, FEMA being part of DHS, is to take care of survivors. And if we're seeing disinformation out there about what survivors can do and what kind of benefits they can get, we're going to dispel that. Same with our southern border, our mission of protecting the border. If human trafficking gangs are claiming that they, for a price, can take people up and ensure that they get in safely into the United States, we're going to dispel that disinformation. I think we would really be stepping aside from our mission if we didn't. So we're not the arbiter of truth. We don't tackle disinformation of any sort or kind. It's where it really has a tangible tie to a core Homeland Security interest and always subject to very strict civil liberties, civil rights, and privacy protections.
So at this point, you view it as mainly trying to dispel misinformation about DHS's core responsibilities, and that's sort of the mission.
Correct. It's subject to very strict safeguards.
Switching gears, you had mentioned at your confirmation hearing that one of the things that you would be focused on in your role is looking to the future and looking to competition with China and how to approach that. You've now been on the job a year and a half. What is your assessment of your role, DHS's role in sort of planning for that?
Sure. So we have a number of roles actually that are relevant to China and threats coming out of China. So just clearly on the cybersecurity front, helping network defenders around the country repel Chinese state-sponsored cyber attacks, which can be done for espionage purposes, can be done to steal intellectual property, can be done to steal mass troves of Americans' personal data. We also have a core interest in protecting American technology and critical infrastructure from falling into the control of the PRC government, of the government of the People's Republic of China. So we're a member of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States that reviews all inbound investment for national security concerns, and we take that really seriously. We also are at the front lines of the mission of making sure that we're not importing into this country goods that are made with forced labor in Xinjiang province, which is really a scourge and a human rights violation of really historic proportions, targeting the Uyghur minority there. And that's through our customs function at the port. And so
that's become a big part of your portfolio.
That's become a significant part of my portfolio. Another hat I wear is as chair of the Federal Forced Labor Enforcement Task Force. And we take that mission really seriously too. And so, look, the relationship with China, the competition with China is incredibly multifaceted. There's a lot of really pernicious threats to our way of life and our security that come from the vision and the direction of that the Chinese government is pushing that country, and DHS is at its post protecting the American people from that.
I think we have a few minutes left, and I think we have some mics set up if we have any audience questions. I can't quite see, but is there anyone that wants to ask a question, or we can continue?
I'll ask a quick question. Thank you for your comments. The word that stood out for me. Thank you for your comments. The word that stood out for me in your comments was very worrisome. Did you want to expand on that in terms of how those of us in this room and watching the event and people in the country in general, what level of concern should we be applying to the threats on cybersecurity?
The highest level of concern that you can muster is the short answer. Look, with ransomware, for example, I mean that can bring a company to its knees operationally in an instant and really pose an existential crisis. Colonial Pipeline being really just an extreme but real-world example of the impacts. And so, listen, we are absolutely meeting with CEOs, meeting with boards, and telling them this is no longer just an issue for the IT team. This is a core business issue, a business risk issue, and it's one that you need to take deadly seriously. And I think we've seen that message registered and heard when you see these surveys of sort of top boardroom concerns. Cyber is virtually always right up there, and that's really good. But there needs to be more investment. There needs to be more focus on it. The CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, are really they're really stretched thin. They're often under-resourced. They're burning the candle from both ends between trying to build and sustain their information security programs, and then also just being called upon in the middle of the night to respond to incidents, and they need the support of their leadership. So when I meet with leadership teams from companies, what I always tell them is, they ask, well, what can I do? I say, create an open environment for your CISO to tell you what he or she needs.
How receptive have the boards that you've interacted with been to that message?
I think they're receptive. I think they want. I think board directors and CEOs want to do the right thing. I think sometimes it's hard for them. They view it as a technical issue sometimes, and they're not sure. They're not aware of what they can actually do as non-technical, non-expert people in the field. But the point is, you hire the experts and you enable and empower and resource them.
We have some others up here.
Yes, hi. Can't hear me. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Yes, hi. Stefan Angelkovic from Eagle Project. I have a question. It's great that we lessons learned, but it's always after. And it's like we're running after the attacks, which is what the best we can do, and it's great, everything that you're doing. So I was wondering, would you consider for the energy industry and the critical infrastructure of the United States, would you consider a dedicated wireless network just for that industry, because it's open to attacks and it's of national security issue? And what would it take, in your opinion, to make that happen?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I have to think about the dedicated wireless network idea. I need to think about that. But I will say, not everything we're doing is about chasing the last incident. CISA just released about 2 or 3 weeks ago something called the Cybersecurity Performance Goals, which are a defined set of the highest impact security practices that any organization should be deploying to protect their networks, regardless of what industry they're in. And it's been really, really well received by industry. I think it's going to be very helpful in particular to smaller and medium-sized businesses that may not have the deeply resourced information security teams. It's also going to be really useful for reporting to boards and CEOs as a way to measure, hey, how are we doing, where are our gaps, and what do we need to do to improve? So a lot of what we're doing is on the proactive side, enabling companies to defend themselves. At the end of the day, companies are customers of ours, and we need to be really customer-centric in terms of what does industry need to protect themselves, because that protects the nation. And so we are looking to what they need and providing things like the cybersecurity performance goals.
Sorry, I think we're at time, so thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Aruna. Thank you.